meeting is being conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Brown Act to facilitate teleconferencing and to reduce risk of COVID-19 transmission at public meetings. Ordinarily, the Brown Act sets strict rules for teleconferencing. AB 361 suspends some of those rules during a state of emergency where local and state health officials have recommended social distancing. The Brown Act continues to require that we notice meetings in advance and allow the public to participate. The EBCE Executive Committee has met all of the applicable noticing requirements, and the public is welcome to participate in this meeting. If you wish to be recognized during public comment, please fill out a public comment speaker form found at ebce.org/meetings and use the raised hand feature in Zoom. You'll be recognized for 3 minutes. Comments can also be submitted online at ebce.org/meetings. And with that, I can take roll.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
And just for the record today, we actually will not be doing 3 minutes. It'll depend on how many participants have their hand raised. We do have a hard stop today, at least by 2. Normally we try to end by 1, but I would like to make sure that we maintain a quorum today.
Great, thank you very much. Member Ariola. Member Ariola?
Present.
Thank you. Member Call. Member Call. Member Martinez.
I'm here, and I'll note that Member Cobb just joined the meeting.
Oh, great, thank you. Member Call.
Is this
Member
the call?
Thank you. Member May. Member May.
Here. Sorry.
Thank you. Chair Lopez.
Present.
We have a
Thank
quorum.
you very much. Thank you very much. So we'll be moving on to our agenda for today, and we do have a very full agenda. I will be your chair. My name is Karina Lopez from San Leandro. We do have the approval of the minutes. If I can have anybody who would like to comment on that on the E committee here, or would like to move the approval of the minutes.
I'll move the minutes.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Thank you very much. It's moved by Member Kalb, seconded by Member Ariola. If
Great.
there are no objections, the minutes passed as they are. Thank you.
Roll call? For roll call
Oh,
vote?
I did a no. Okay, we could do it that way.
Great.
Go ahead.
Member Ariola?
Yes.
Member Call?
Aye.
Member Martinez?
Aye.
Member Mai?
Yes.
Chair Lopez?
Aye.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and go in the order of the agenda today. So we are on item 4, and the title of that is Healthy Communities Partnership. And this is an informational item, which means that there will be no voting on this item. This will be just for the executive committee to comment and provide direction. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead with staff.
Would you like to do public comment?
Presentation,
Okay.
please.
We're doing the presentation, Adrienne,
Okay,
and then we do clarifying questions by the members, and then we'll do public comment, and then we'll have a discussion.
great. Thank you.
Just one question. We did not do general public comment yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't see that on the agenda. Oh, actually, I do item 2, excuse me. So are there any comments on non-agenda items?
Yes, we do have hands raised for general public comment. I'll recognize Tom Kelly for 3 minutes.
No, for 2 minutes today.
For 2 minutes.
We're doing
Great.
2 minutes. And if you are commenting on something that's on the agenda, I will be abbreviating you, and then we'll be putting you back later on into the meeting. Thank you. 2 minutes.
Great. This is for non-agendized topics. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
So I've mentioned this many times in the past. The EBCE's JPA agreement clearly describes the purpose of EBCE. The purposes for the initial participants entering into this agreement include securing electrical energy supply for customers in participating jurisdictions, addressing climate change by reducing energy-related greenhouse gas emissions, promoting electrical rate price stability, and fostering local economic benefits such as job creation, community energy programs, and local power development. In the past, EBCE staff and the board chair have stated publicly that the JPA recitals are only guidelines, suggesting that EBCE is not obligated to comply with the JPA purposes. Those of us who actually worked to establish EBCE would beg to differ. We went through a 3-year process to establish those purposes. In fact, at the 2018 board meeting that set the rates and emissions content for Bright Choice, Director Kalb, understanding that the staff recommendation for emissions intensity was greater than PG&E's, convinced his colleagues to improve the emissions intensity of Bright Choice to make it cleaner than PG&E, just as was stated in the JPA agreement. So here's my recommendation. As members of the governing board, direct EBCE staff to comply with the JPA, or if you're unwilling to do that, I suggest when updating the JPA agreement to include the city of Stockton, that you strike those purposes that you believe are no longer obligatory so that EBCE can continue to provide customers with the dirtiest electricity in Northern California while remaining compliant with its other JPA obligations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, 2 minutes.
Jessica Tovar, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Jessica Tovar, coordinator of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance, but my comments today are in regards to a letter that you should have received from representation representing 2 of the founding organizations of East Bay Clean Power Alliance, Local Clean Energy Alliance, and the SF Bay chapter of the Sierra Club. And this letter has to do with the fact that ratepayer money is actually public money, and it's not in the purview of East Bay Community Energy to be gifting ratepayer funds. As a matter of fact, that is contradictory to what the actual Assembly Bill 117, which describes what a community choice aggregator or program is and what it should be doing, which is to provide energy services and programs that are related to energy needs. And you have this all outlined in the local development business plan that you adopted back in 2018 and that the Board of Supervisors approved funding for back in 2016. And I want to just emphasize that as elected officials, you have a responsibility to represent your constituency and should know that giving away monies, public money, that's actually something you should not be doing. If anything, you should be standing up and representing the public and protecting the use of their funds and working with the community to decide how those funds are used. So I wanted to just emphasize that because it's very important that we stay on track and actually provide clean energy resilience for the communities that you serve. Clean power to the people.
Thank you very much. Nia Tisdale, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Nia Tisdale with Local Clean Energy Alliance. I just wanted to say that any entity that is receiving money from EBC has to go through an application and a public process. And this was not done with the $15 million gift proposal. The original proposal lacked transparency with the public, and we definitely need to see more transparency going forward. And EBC has the local development business plan as a roadmap that builds resilience in communities, a roadmap to create equitable access to clean energy and benefits that come with that. And this is what we should be investing in. And EBCE is not meant to be a charity or a medical research entity. We need clean energy solutions that are rooted in equity. And EBCE made a commitment to fund local development. And so today it is unclear where this proposal stands. So it would be greatly appreciated to get clarity on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great,
Next
thank you. Neha Bazaj, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Neha Bazaj, and I am a Senior Economic Inclusion Manager for Emerald Cities Collaborative, a national and local nonprofit working to ensure that frontline communities are prioritized in the clean energy transition. CCAs like EBCE offer a unique opportunity for local communities to determine the use of net surplus funds. We would like to underscore the need for transparency and the opportunity for community input into the use of the projected net surplus for fiscal year 22 to 23. In particular, the allocation of funds for local development and grants should be determined through an open and transparent process with multiple opportunities for community input, and should be directly aligned with EBCE's local business development plan and the 3 types of community investment grants named within that plan. Net surplus funds should be used to support efforts that proactively reduce frontline communities' exposure to pollution and that increase their climate resiliency. Pollution prevention measures such as building electrification and community grants that support local clean energy projects are the most direct pathways to reducing frontline communities' exposure to pollution and increasing their climate resiliency. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no further public comment.
Thank you very much, and we'll move on now to item 4. So we'll go ahead and with that presentation, and again, we're doing the presentation, clarifying questions, public comment, and then we'll have discussion.
Thank you, Adrian. Okay, so item 4 here is an item we have put together in response to feedback that the board provided at the July board meeting to provide a more sort of foundational assessment of options and review of potential goals for what an investment in a program or set of programs that seek to create, link, understand, and design opportunities to intervene at the nexus of poor indoor air quality, pulmonary disease, and home electrification. All things that kind of align with the goals of EBC. So the intent here is to define what some potential goals of a potential program or partnership could be, and get some feedback on that. So next slide, please. So partnership goals or potential goals, and I say put these as goals as sort of a discussion starter for feedback. So based on the conversations that we've had over in these meetings over the last number of months, this is sort of where we've come as a starting point. So one is we want to understand program designs, specific program designs that relate to the kinds of electrification measures that we could support the deployment of, the program designs that reduce sources of air pollution that impact our most vulnerable populations. So what are the kinds of air pollution that have the most impact on vulnerable populations? As part of this, we want to better understand the impacts of natural gas combustion in homes, and then further understand how does indoor air quality improve when you deploy electrification measures in those homes, and then further, does that actually have a nexus with public health? So are there public health benefits of taking out natural gas cooktops and replacing them with induction cooktops, for example? So to that end, the goal here is deploy 1,000 indoor air quality monitors to measure indoor air pollution impacts of natural gas combustion, and then design and deliver home electrification retrofits to participants in the study to understand how indoor air quality changes and improves, but also to understand how health outcomes change and hopefully improve through the deployment of home electrification. So, and then, if you think about that, if you're going to run this kind of a study that's a longer term study, you do want to think about how you actually then follow those patients and or those folks who are impacted by bad air, and you improve the overall level of care to those populations. So those are sort of the 4 kind of starting point goals that we wanted to sort of put out there for comment and discussion. Next slide, please. So this sort of you take those goals and it sort of translates into 4 programmatic elements. One is a research program. It's a multi-year research study to understand the nexus between air pollution, indoor air quality, electrification programs, and medical care. So it's really, if you want to look at it holistically, what is the relationship between these things? And critically for us, given that we have this real emphasis on home electrification, where does home electrification fit in this agenda? The second is actually, if we indeed decide that this research project has merit, then you actually want to pursue discrete projects. So that is the indoor air quality monitoring project. If you're going to do monitoring, it's really, in my view, necessary to give those folks who are participating an opportunity to adopt electrification to reduce indoor air pollution. So there's a tied in home electrification program that is tied to the monitoring project. And then finally, as we understand what the impacts of natural gas combustion in particular are in homes, we want to create resources to provide a higher level of care to folks who are most impacted, one, and create tie-ins for those folks who are suffering from pulmonary disease to home electrification programs that will allow for swap outs of gas cooktops, gas furnaces, gas water heaters. Next slide, please. So when we think about the kinds of roles, there's sort of an indicative assessment of the kinds of participants and roles we might want to think about if we were to implement a program like this. It's quite a big group. And before we actually start to really think about specifically who, we want to think about the kinds of partners and make sure that there's generally a view like this makes sense for the kinds of partners we'd want to bring to run this kind of a program. So one is a public health partner. That public health partner, we would envision leading the overall air pollution and indoor air quality research program and being the co-lead in the indoor air quality monitoring project itself, and also being sort of the wraparound provider of services to recruit folks in to, at scale, further electrification programs. East Bay Community Energy, we're predominantly serving as a funder of this project. You have the Building Decarb Coalition. They're the nation's preeminent building electrification advocacy organization. They work to design and deploy building decarbonization programs and research projects nationally, and have significant expertise and access to funding for particularly induction cooktop deployment programs, looking at the impact of taking natural gas combustion out of the kitchen and replacing with clean induction cooking. You need a project delivery partner. So someone who can actually go and install the monitors, install the electrification measures. This could be an entity like a Block Power, who EBC has partnerships with already to do home electrification, could be someone else. We also would want an air quality monitoring partner. So an entity that has the technology and sort of the analytical capacity to actually go and take in the data about air quality before and after the home electrification retrofits occur. And then we need funding partners. So grant and philanthropy partners who could provide funds for various elements of this project. And then a project finance partner to help provide low-cost financing for deep electrification retrofits that we'd want to make available to consumers. Next slide, please. So this is an indicative set of actions. Today, we're presenting this for comment. We'd want to bring this to the full board in October, depending on the feedback, for another informational item. Based on the informational feedback we get here and in October, we would seek to bring a more comprehensive proposal to the board in November for approval. The approval there would be to proceed to pursue this partnership. Then from December through April, we would work to identify potential partners, potential sources of funding. And then we would come back to the board in April with a seeking approval for the partnership agreements. And the goal there would be to launch in May. So that's it.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll go ahead and turn this back over to the members and ask if there's any questions, and I will recognize Member Martinez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question, Nick. So you mentioned philanthropic partnerships to help with the funding of this initiative. I'm just wondering what would be the approach of the agency in identifying and pitching any potential partners. I'm just, because I work in that industry, I know that for those who were heavily invested in equities and their corpuses, you know, it's been a down stock market for a bit, and it might continue to be for a bit. So just would love to hear more about your thinking in enticing and solidifying a partnership with folks who have similar desires.
Yeah, so why don't we go, can we go to slide, I guess it's slide number 4. So, you know, I think the way we look at it is there's a couple different places where, you know, a philanthropic organization could bring funds to bear. And so that's sort of what we would target is, you know, foundations that we know have specific interests, say in home electrification. They would be entities that we would look to partner with us around the funding necessary to actually deliver home electrification retrofits. So let's just assume we were to move forward with this and to say every participant in the study, they have to obviously want it, but if they want it, we will give them a 100% free induction retrofit. So we would take all the gas out of their kitchen and we replace it with clean induction. Let's just say that costs $6,000 per household on average. We would be targeting philanthropic organizations that we know have funded these kinds of projects before. And we would say, this is a unique opportunity to deploy philanthropic dollars because one, you have a co-funding partner in EBC. So it's not like you have to pay for everything. Your dollars are going further. So that would be, you know, that would be sort of our approach is finding areas, you know, I think as we think about partners like the Building Decarb Coalition, the Building Decarbonation Coalition has a lot of relationships in philanthropy already. And so we've had some conversations with them about foundations that are actively funding in this space already and are actually looking for real projects like the one that this could become, as opposed to funding more research that doesn't have a connection yet to physical deployment. So we think that physical deployment piece is potentially quite attractive.
But you already have some leads. I'm happy to hear that.
Correct. Yeah. So, you know, we have some meetings that we've already set with some philanthropic entities that have expressed interest in this partnership. I think the way we would want to start is, you know, seek, you know, memorandums of understanding or, you know, kind of agreements to say, hey, we're not agreeing to fund anything, but we really are interested. In the same way, we're not seeking an agreement from the board to fund anything. We're really just trying to put some pieces together right now. So, you know, it would be ideally you have 2 or 3 philanthropic organizations that really are interested in the space saying, hey, we want to find a way to work with you. And so we count us in to try to work to develop something. And if it meets our parameters, then we would be very interested in providing some funding.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other member questions at this point? I have a couple of questions. So the first question I have is, what are we talking about in terms of budgeting, or do you have a ballpark?
I don't think we're ready to share a ballpark yet. I think it really depends on the feedback we get from the board, you know, how expansive or what is the level of interest in pursuing this. Each of these pieces, I would say that, so before we get a budget, I would say we really need your feedback to sort of see, is this something you would like us to pursue further?
Okay, and then so the next question I have is the public health partner lead. Who would you potentially look to see?
I don't know that we can say that yet at this time either. Again, I think we need to get more feedback from this board as to sort of what is this worth pursuing? Are there any specific, say, do we want to focus on a specific sort of highly impacted population like children who suffer from asthma? So the pediatric asthma, that is a population, or asthma more broadly. There are a handful of public health partners that work across the region that might be valuable. I think the way we would look at this is, first and foremost, we need to scope this out with the board and get approval around the scope. Second, I think we need to think about our funding partners. So our philanthropic funding partners, our local government funding partners. For instance, we've been talking to Stop Waste about the relationship between the indoor air quality and induction cooking. They have funding from the Air District in that area. They're very interested in partnering with us around a program like this. The Building Decarb Coalition has Air District funds as well. We are having some conversations with EPA District 9 that's very interested in funding indoor air quality projects focused on electrification. So I think we need to understand sort of the potential range of funding partners, and based on that, develop sort of a scope of what we want this to look like. And then we would go and assess, based on those criteria, probably through some sort of a request for qualifications to say, all right, here's what we want to do. Who's qualified to partner with us to go and deliver on this in the public health realm?
Okay. Those are my questions. I see Member Calvin, I recognize you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you for this presentation. I know there are obviously details to refine and work out, and you laid out a rough timeline to explore and get all those questions answered and decided if this goes forward. One question I have is, if I'm reading this correctly, there's basically there's a study that's going to take place, and there may be 1,000 households that are part of this study. Is that right so far?
So I think that is a starting point for what we sort of are thinking could be a project, right? So that you want to overall have build competency to research the nexus between air quality high at a generally, indoor air quality specifically, home electrification, and public health impacts. And so that's the overall sort of research project that we think is not the connection between all those things is not sufficiently well understood. So establish that sort of center of excellence, and then within that very specifically pursue this specific project where you seek to recruit 1,000 participants to deploy indoor air quality monitors and do an associated 1,000 electrification retrofits.
Right. Okay. So the 1,000 households, if this is what would be happening, that would be identified or invited to participate. I presume they would be spread out within the jurisdiction of EBCE, but would they also be focused on households that are identified as low or lower or lowish income? Since part of the suggestion here or implication here is to deliver the improved appliances and infrastructure within the household, that this essentially would be then us providing these appliances and these internal infrastructure in those homes to run those appliances. And I think there'd be desire among the board that if we're going to be helping various homeowners or property owners, if in case if it's multi-unit, we would want to do those that could not do it themselves. And so the thought would be, let's focus on a geographic range of lower income property owners. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Dan, I mean, I guess that's that's more a question to you. It's not a question to me. So like, I'll take that more as a statement to say that if we were to do this, you would like us to focus across the service area, not specifically in one specific region, which at this size would make a lot of sense, and focus on low and moderate income customers.
That would be, yeah. And I think you'll have enough of a range of lower income customers where you could still do a statistically valid study. I don't think you have to have high income people to be a statistically valid study, I think.
Again, it makes sense to me. We're not making any specific presumptions right now. We're just laying out some overall goals. And so that would be a sort of kind of a little bit more detail around the goal to say, not only do this, but really focused on doing this one everywhere. So from Stockton to Fremont to Albany, and focus on low and moderate income customers. Like that makes sense. I just want to make sure that's what you're suggesting.
Well,
that is the thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that right now we're just doing the clarifying questions. And I think the direction that member Cal was starting to begin to give would be more appropriately happen after public comment.
Perfect.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, yeah, I think that's, let me see if I have any other questions offhand here.
But I'll come back to you, member Cal.
I guess the other question is there a broad estimate in terms of how much of our ratepayer money would be part of this project?
I don't think we're at a point where we could make give you an estimate as to how much ratepayer money would be part of this. So
okay, because that will be a question that ultimately we'll be asking down before it's
absolutely
approved. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And member May.
Yes. Hi. So thank you for the presentation and for some of the thought process. I think that hopefully is helpful, not only for the committee and for our fellow commissioners, but for the public. And you mentioned that you've reached out to some organizations, and when the time comes when we're soliciting more of the public input, I hope that if they are some of these nonprofits that have past practices or examples, that we could also showcase or just be able to better connect, examples. I think that would help us to better understand what types of possibilities are there. And I think that this is a good way to utilize both the goals that we had set forth for our community and be able to translate those into more tangible result-based, demonstrations of our support for our own communities. So I think from that perspective, I'm supportive of it. I would be interested in hearing what the public has to say about this.
Okay, are there any other clarifying questions before we move on to public comment? I see no hands raised, so go ahead, Adrian, with public comment, please. 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. For 2 minutes, I see that Barbara Stebbins is signed up on the list for public comment. Thank you. I'll recognize Barbara Stebbins for 2 minutes.
Okay, so Barbara Stebbins, Local Clean Energy Alliance. Clearly, this is a proposal in process. There are so few details that it makes it a little hard to include all the questions that we have in 2 minutes. But certainly, one of the very first ones would have to do with the budget. It seems like the board would need to see a budget before they could approve moving forward with this, and which makes November seem like a pretty aggressive timeline to try and get this before the board. We also have a number of questions just related to why EBCE is engaging in if you look at where EBCE is a co-lead, it's only on the research project. And yet it makes more sense for EBCE to us to be co-lead on the electrification portion of the proposal, because that's clearly within the agency's experience, expertise, and the purpose for which it was created. The research project is quite problematic, if you ask me, and I, as a PhD in molecular biology, I will send you some other comments I have. But one of the very first would simply be, what are the specific questions you hope to be able to address by doing this research project? And then I think the biggest comment, I will echo what Dan Kell brought up. If the project overall, if the free, electrification part of the project is not geared toward those communities where asthma rates are the highest, which are disadvantaged communities identified by CalEnviroscreen, then it's a slap in the face to equity and would not be acceptable to us and many other organizations in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
And just a reminder, if you do pass the 2 minutes, you are allowed to, you could just reset that, Adrian, you are allowed to finish your sentence, but I would ask that you do not go into second sentence. I will ask the clerk to just automatically mute you. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, board members. My name is Melissa Yu, and I'm with the Sierra Club. I'm really excited to hear about this effort to fund building decarbonization, and I think that creating a program like this to improve access to healthcare and prevent asthma are really great goals. And I really also want to echo what Barbara said. I appreciate Councilmember Kalb's comments on wanting to focus on low and moderate income customers. And I think that will also take some time to research and make sure that we are actually identifying those most in need. And similarly, want to also echo some of Barbara's comments as well. EBCE is non-agency that should be conducting this research. I think the Building Decarbonization Coalition would be a great entity to do so. And on top of that, there are already many studies that do show the nexus of gas appliances and indoor air quality and the health effects of that. And I'm also interested in seeing other programs that have been referred in the local development business plan that would additionally have other direct impacts on reducing emissions that are also important triggers of asthma. And these are projects like demand response, energy efficiency, microgrids, islandable solar technology, that will not go down during power outages, renewable energy storage, and electrification is one of them that you all are discussing today. So it does sound like this is still in its very early stages, and we are looking to learn more. And I appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Audrey Ichinose, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Okay. I'm waiting to be reset. Okay, thank you very much. Audrey Ichinose, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I think that the staff should be thanked for its good faith effort here to modify the earlier $15 million grant proposal for Children's Hospital. And what's been presented is, of course, very sketchy, but I think the original objections remain. The rework proposal does not utilize EBCE's primary expertise or focus on its prime mission. Moreover, I think the goal of measuring indoor air quality as linked to gas appliance usage seems oddly redundant. It's widely known that gas combustion indoors gives off methane emissions, no matter the quality of the appliance. Thirdly, Healthy Communities Partnerships draws out the timeline for action, I think, where the opposite is called for, given the increasing threats of climate warming. And finally, I also allude to the questions that Director Kalb brought up. How are we to identify the 1,000 recipients who will even be placed in this study. It seems to me that the nexus between low income and low income households and the benefits of energy efficiency seems to be weakening. And therefore, I think that the staff should not devote any more time and energy to this project. There are many better uses of EBCE surplus funds and staff time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Jane Kelly, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Can you unmute?
Yeah, I said start.
Jane Kelly, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Jane Kelly. I live in Berkeley. I believe that EBCE needs to comply with its legally defined mission in the JPA rather than wandering off trying to engage in public health philanthropy. This May, EBC suddenly and out of the blue announced the proposal to gift $15 million of ratepayer funds to the Children's Hospital in Oakland for asthma programs. We were all taken aback by this off-mission sole source proposal and asked how and when this plan came about. We received no answer, and that forced us to submit Public Record Act requests to EBCE as well as to each member city. The documents sent to us so far reveal that board members became aware of the proposal in April and that it originated with Mr. Chazet. In April, he wrote to board members stating that EBCE was already engaging in discussions with UCSF and that he can think of no better way to establish EBCE's legacy. We further learned that Mr. Chazet wrote to the board indicating a personal interest in asthma, stating, "The decision to pursue a partnership with Oakland Children's to invest deeply into asthma care started from my personal experience." In the same message, he writes, "This coming fiscal year, EBCE has the fortune of a major surplus and with it the chance to make legacy investments, a term that is used repeatedly in later documents. Our CCA was not created to establish legacies. However, if EBCE wishes to continue using that term, a true EBCE legacy would be to immediately reduce all carbon emissions associated with the EBCE procured electricity, which in turn would eliminate the air pollution that is a cause of asthma. I hope you will agree that EBCE should be complying with its legally defined mission in the JPA rather than trying to pursue public health philanthropy." Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. So what happened to Children's Hospital? What happened to Children's Hospital? There have been months of non-public meetings going on among UCSF staff, EBCE staff, the board members themselves. Where are they in this? And I hate to say it, but I have a suspicion that they are still there, but they are not being defined in this outline that has been presented to us today. You know, I worked for the Environmental Health Investigations Branch at the California Department of Public Health, and they did a lot of asthma work. And I can tell you, based on what I've seen today, based on this proposal, EBCE has only a very small role to play in any kind of public health research. And that would be to be available to provide electrification in terms of induction ranges or electric water heaters to homes where people suffer from asthma. And the way that would work is that Children's and Kaiser would get together with their own money and their own grant sources and work to define where that money, electrification would be best utilized. Then they would contact EBCE and ask them to make the funds available to switch out the gas ranges, et cetera. EBCE would not be the lead on this. EBCE would be a partner, but would not be a defining partner. So can we get back to our mission? Can we get back to clean energy? I'm preparing some data for you that I'll share before the next board meeting that shows where EBCE lies in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions. And hopefully that'll jar some of you enough to make some changes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Tovar, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I actually have a lot of comments that won't fit into 2 minutes. So I guess the first is that, I actually did an air sampling study. It was an indoor-outdoor air sampling study, and it was a National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences study. And it was in collaboration with UC Berkeley, Brown University, Silent Spring Institute, and many others. It just to reiterate, a lot of this kind of studies already has been done. We've sampled a lot of homes. There are other studies. I guess what we'll do is provide you and point you to some of those studies. And again, this isn't in the purview of East Bay Community Energy as a community choice program. I will say also too, I have asked EBCE to apply for the Transformative Climate Communities funding through the Strategic Growth Council, of which I've never received a reply. That money could be used to do a more holistic replacement of gas in homes. So for example, it isn't just the stove, it's the heating of the home. It's also the heating of water that needs to be addressed. And we shouldn't be doing these projects piecemealed. Okay, I want us to understand that it needs to be more holistic. Other issues we have is around equity. Are we doing this for renters? And are we looking into how to protect renters from being displaced? I have, again, so many more questions. I will be writing them to you. Clean power to the people.
Thank you very much. June,
Just a comment, I did abbreviate this from 3 minutes to 2. Again, if you take a look at, before we move on to the next comment, I just want to make sure that the public's aware there will be another opportunity, to comment publicly at the regular board meeting as well on this topic when it does come back in its whatever refined form it is given by today's meeting. So there'll be more time, and then of course between now and then there'll be more time to also write the board. Thank you. So the next comment, please, Adrian.
Great, thank you very much. June, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
I think it has been well established, the nexus between air quality and pollution and fossil fuels. And many, many studies have been done. And those studies point to taking action, the action that EBCE is uniquely positioned and able to take. Hospitals can't switch out and help electrify homes. The Building Decarbonization Coalition can point you to many, many, many studies that show that action is what we need. Now, studies can continue, and as EBCE takes action to electrify homes and reduce fossil fuel pollution and thereby preventing asthma, this we know, there's been studies. As we do that, we can make that work available to researchers that want to do ongoing research, but it is EBCE's role to do that work. And they're the ones that everyone's waiting on to do that work so there can be less suffering and less treatment needed. I think for the only thing that I would say, like Audrey, this whole proposal should just be scrapped, or really just take portion 3 and broaden it out to electrification for the most impacted low-income communities of color that need the support, budget $15 million there, and get moving with your partners. You can let people know you're doing it. You could partner with those that are already doing air monitoring and have already identified who is being impacted. There's a lot of ways to partner, but we should not become, EBC should not be a fundraiser giving 15 millions to others and then going out and trying to fundraise. BCA should spend its 15 million to not delay on reducing fossil fuels electrifying, fulfilling its mission, and then offering itself up to co-fundraise with others on that project if that's possible, but not for other organizations' missions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
There is one further name, Naha Bazaj. If you could raise you're signed up for the speaker list, but if you just raise your hand if you would like to be recognized. That concludes public comment. There's no further public comment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, public, for commenting. I just want to note for the record, I did ask the clerk to go ahead and put this in the packet, that there were 47 public comments that were part of the 9/21/22 Board of Directors meeting. And there have been also some comments that have been included in the packet as well regarding this particular item. Those comments are primarily in the form of a form letter. If you read one, they're very similar to each other along the same sentiment. But I just want to note that they're within the packet itself as well. So I want to thank everybody that's here today and the public at large that took the time to, out of a very busy and hectic schedule, to go ahead and participate in this process to help the board be informed of the public's will. We're going to go ahead and move over to director comments, member comments, sorry. And I promised I would start with Member Kalb. And so Member Kalb, if you'd like to go ahead and begin, and I believe previously we're giving direction. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think I basically said the comments I wanted to share at this point. I think the comments from some of the members of the public are obviously all on point and relevant. And so that will be incorporated into the next steps that staff might take on this, of course. As I mentioned, focusing on the lower income categories in terms of those involved in the study, if there is a study, and most importantly, those who are getting their infrastructure in the home and appliances switched out. Someone mentioned essentially mentioned renters, which essentially would mean multi-unit buildings. I think we want those buildings included in this 1,000, certainly, and not just single family homes for sure. Yeah, just questions about how much the total budget for this, and what portion of that budget is coming from or would come from our ratepayers, and whatever surplus we may have to spend. And then as we identify potential partners, just want to, yeah, I think it's fine to pursue the next steps as is suggested before it gets to the full board for full approval. There are a lot of steps to take, and so I think it's fine to take these steps and explore what those details might be, and then ultimately the board will make a final decision. But let's gather the information. So I'm okay moving forward with the information gathering and the creation of the proposal. Obviously, I'm going to hold off in deciding whether I support the proposal, because we don't have a proposal yet. We have a chart and first steps to come up with a proposal, and I'm totally fine moving forward with these steps as suggested.
Thank you very much, Member Kalb. So just to reiterate, as we build consensus here, what I heard you say is that you are looking still to gather information and would like to continue to gather the information, but no specific recommendations at this point.
Thank you. I think we don't have enough information to foresee a final recommendation. I think the way it was laid out was, here's some information, here's a chart, here's next steps to further refine a potential proposal, And I think doing all those next steps to get to a proposal is a good idea, and based in part on input people are sharing with the staff, and then as things are further refined, we'll have other check-ins, and we may say, oh well, move in that direction, and then eventually we might get a full-blown proposal with a lot of details, and then we'll decide then, but we don't have those details yet.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm not sure who was first in the queue, whether it was Member Martinez or Member May. Adrian, can you help me there?
Member Martinez.
Thank you, Member May.
Yes.
Go ahead, Member Martinez.
Thank you. I'll just go ahead and agree with everything that Member Kalb has said. I definitely want to see a focus on the low to moderate income communities, and I think it makes sense to look across the service territory for folks that we want to include in this program. We should focus specifically on multifamily, not exclusively on multifamily, but there are going to be additional complications, I think, with multifamily that we should consider. One thing I do want to focus on is, which I think might be aided by engaging a public health partner, is finding those specific people to and families to recruit into the program, because there certainly are studies, and I'll thank the members of the public who brought that up, and please do share those with staff. I think they're important. There are studies that show that there is a nexus between those frontline, low-income, disadvantaged communities and the impacts of asthma. Okay, we know that. We all know that. What we need to know are what are the specific homes that we need to make offers to? Who are the specific people? Who are the frequent flyers in the emergency rooms? And we want to reduce those trips, not only because there is a burden on public dollars, but it is a public health issue. These are real lives in our community that are being impacted. These are children, our most vulnerable residents, whose lives we can stand to change. There's a lot of talk about the timeline today, and I think that if we get this going, I agree with Member Kalb that we can give feedback and that this can be a more formed proposal for either the executive board or the entire board to review. But I think it's time to get moving, because as winter's coming, people will be spending more time indoors. If you are like my neighbors who live down the street and you don't have adequate heating in your home, and you're opening your oven to heat up your home and it causes a fire, not to mention the health issues that go along with those impacts, that's going to happen every winter until we're able to reach these people. So I appreciate staff for taking the comments of the board and taking the comments of the public that we heard last June, and making a pivot that is comprehensive with all of our feedback, in that it really puts the focus on the electrification and getting into those homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Martinez. Member May, please.
Thank you for the comments from both the community as well as my fellow commissioners. I think this looks like a straw man for us to build upon with some of the more of the details. I definitely would echo the consideration for those most vulnerable in terms of low income. And I know that it sounds like a lot of this conversation is centered around our youth, but I also would say when it comes to vulnerability, and especially air quality, what we've seen during this pandemic and some of the health issues, where a lot of our seniors also being impacted by that. So I'd ask that we consider that. I don't know, for us as a city, we have about 70 plus skilled nursing facilities too. And so when it comes to being able to reach a larger group and making some of those access, I think that would be one area. Another area, which is a little different too, which I'm not sure we would include, but it just may be something we want to consider. One of the challenges right now that we're seeing throughout our cities is workforce and having that development. So when we're partnering with these, that it might be an opportunity for us to work with either some of our educational institutions or our labor groups to see if there's opportunities to build some of that into it. I know this is very early and preliminary, but from one of our challenges and with our limited resources, that maybe we can get some multiple benefits to this factor, whether it's the combination of a better understanding, but also at the same time, perhaps also some of the workforce that we need as a city, as our community partners, and especially with these nonprofits that we're talking to. So it's just, like I said, it's not definitely something that I am able to comment on support or inclusion, but more of a question of how we compile and address and engage others to be part of this conversation.
Thank you very much. Member Ariola. Member Ariola, you are on mute. Thank you.
All right, sorry, I'm having some connectivity problems. But I just wanted to echo a lot of what I've heard from my fellow members. But I did just also want to highlight the fact that I would reiterate that I would support, efforts to address asthma, particularly in the Central Valley, where just
Member Ariola, you've cut out.
Did you catch that?
No, Member Ariola. Can you please try again?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Member Ariola.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. All right, I think what I'll do is we'll pause on Member Ariola until he's able to rectify his technical issue, and we'll move back to Member May.
My apologies, that hand was still up from before. Thank you.
No worries. I would like to also comment, so I'll go ahead and comment, and then I'll come back to Member Ariola. So I think some of the comments that my colleagues here are right on point. I think we do need to continue to gather information and also get more impact or more feedback from the board. I also agree that we need to have this geographically diversified throughout the service area, that we should also focus on the most vulnerable of our communities, which includes communities of color, low-income folks, people on fixed income, including seniors. I think that would be a wise way of providing the ability for people to have access and in a way that would be impactful on the daily life of individuals. And I grew up, just telling a little bit about my own story is we actually were a family. I grew up very low income, and we were migrant farm working family, renting. And we would, if we were lucky enough to have a stove, and we didn't always have one, we would open up the stove to provide heat or leave the burners on to provide heat. That's if we were lucky. And, I know that there's some comment that was made today that, that this should be completely scratched. But I do think that there are a lot of people who have this lived experience in the service area. In my own community, 67% of our children are on free and reduced lunch. During COVID, the impact of food insecurity grew 8-fold. There are arrears in electrical and utility payments and in water payments that were made whole. There are people who do not have the luxury of being able to afford $6,000 to $7,000 in upgrades to their appliances. So this is a way of providing the ability for people to be able to have a higher quality of life, perhaps even longevity of life for themselves and their families in a way that I don't know of anybody else doing this work. So I'm very appreciative of this pivot. There was, like I had mentioned earlier, a lot of comments. Staff has pivoted. And I think we continue to work through of how we move forward with new and novel ideas as we have continued to really be on the front line as a CCA. We are on the march to 100% renewable. And now it's really about thinking about what is the next phase in terms of the maturation of this CCA, what comes next. And when I think about this program and programs like it, where we take new ideas and think out of the box, what we're really doing is we're creating long-term strategies and transitioning ourselves into an organization that is thinking about the long game on a multitude of levels. So I would invite some of the commenters to continue to collaborate with us and to provide comment to us so that we can get feedback and continue to evolve what the recommendations look like coming from staff. And I want to thank staff for, for being responsive. I'm going to come back to Member Ariola. I do not see Member Ariola on. Do you, Adrian?
He is, Member Ariola has not returned to the meeting.
Okay. What I'm going to do is, okay, I'm going to do a quick check here because there are a couple of things. First of all, I need to know from you, Nick, whether you feel like you have enough information to move forward from us, enough direction and ideas to move forward for the next meeting.
I do.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, fantastic. Okay, good. And then the next thing would be basically, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to, is that, oh good, he's
Yes.
back on. Let's just wait a minute or two. Because I do want to have his comments included to provide staff direction. Member Ariola, we are ready for your input.
Thank you. Sorry for that. I had to switch devices. I just wanted to echo what I heard from my colleagues. Ultimately, I do want to highlight the fact that particularly in the Central Valley, we do have incredibly high asthma rates because of the geography and the air quality. So I'm not opposed to investing towards those types of solutions. However, I do concern related to the equity issues and would like to do what we can to highlight low-income communities and particularly renters. We have such high housing rates in the Central Valley, and we do not have a lot of access for affordable housing. So I know that oftentimes those populations are overlooked. I want to make sure that we're investing in them. But I do want to acknowledge what I hear from the community members. And as we move forward, I think it might be imperative into how we assess the investment with these types of programs, that we also have an opportunity to contrast it with the amount that we're investing in local development types of business plans. I think it's something that as the city of Tracy joined and as we were working to facilitate the city of Stockton joining, we were really committed to that kind of local development into programs. I want to make sure that we're seeing that through. So as we're assessing how we're redirecting particular funds, that being the centralized mission of the organization and how we sold new members to join the organization, I would ask that we have that as a factor with which we can contrast how we're investing elsewhere. So those are my comments. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Member Ariola. And so, Nick, if you can go ahead and include that as well as part of, feedback and direction for updates to this concept. All right, so we are going to go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. Now, as we normally try to end by 1 o'clock, we are running up against the clock for a more lengthy meeting. Part of it is because we were having a lengthy meeting at a regular meeting, and we pushed one of the agenda items to the executive committee. Now, we are going to have one member come off at 1:35, and then we have a hard stop at 2.
I'd like us to, if possible, can we do item 6 out of
Yeah.
order? Because it's actually okay, I think, if we miss item 5, but item 6 is something that will be an action item at the next meeting. So I do think it's useful to present as an info item first.
Okay, thank you. So let's do that. And I believe when we do lose the one member at 1:35, we'll still have a quorum. But at about 2 o'clock, we may be losing our quorum. So I just want to keep that in mind. Okay, so we can go ahead to item 6. Is that okay with all the members here? Just nod, please. All right, we're moving to item 6, and then we'll go back to item 5. Thank you.
And I believe, John, are you going to be presenting here?
No, this would be Doug.
Doug, Mr. Doug. Okay, Doug.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Allen. I'm the EBCE Modeler in Chief. And I'm going to prepare everybody for the results of the Integrated Resource Plan that you'll be seeing in the October board presentation. I'll try to keep this, given the kind of short time frame we have, I'll try to keep this pretty quick. But really want to set you up for what you'll be seeing next month and what the purpose of the IRP is, both on a state level and for EBC itself. Adrian, if you go to the next slide. So the background, the IRP encompasses a long-term resource planning process and CPUC oversight of California's progress to meet SB 350, SB 100, and IRP procurement track goals. LSEs from around the state submit their long-term procurement plans to the CPUC, who assesses the ability of these procurement plans to keep the lights on in California, as well as meet California's statewide emission goals going forward. We do this on a 10-year time frame. So the focus for this upcoming IRP cycle is really from now until 2032. We look a little bit farther out in our modeling, but that's really where the decisions are going to be made and the most important information comes. So the IRP represents the CPUC's kind of umbrella proceeding to consider the coordination of resource availability, making sure that there are enough power plants in the state to keep the lights on during high load events like we saw with the recent heat wave, energy efficiency, demand response, integrated distributed energy resources such as behind the meter solar, the interaction with the renewable portfolio standard, the need for new transmission in the state, and how all of these goals really contribute to the state goals, and then on our level, how they contribute to the goals set out for EBCE by the board. Involves a variety of agencies from around the state, the CPUC, the CEC, the CAISO, the California Air Resources Board, and the State Water Resource Control Board. Typically, it goes on a 2-year cycle. There is the first year is planning what is the electricity demand that California needs to be planning for over the next 10 years. And the second is how do we procure the resources to meet those demands? Next slide, please. So EBCE staff really thinks about the IRP as having 2 key stakeholders, and they have different deliverables for each one. The CPUC is one of the stakeholders. They have a lot of very explicit requirements for our IRP filing. These requirements are set out to make sure that the CPUC is able to take all of the plans submitted by the load serving entities around the state and combine them into a single state preferred portfolio. So as part of that, they are very prescriptive about the load that we need to be planning for, what resources we need to include in our portfolio or consider, the technology availability, things like that. And the results of our analysis must comply with their requirements set out in some kind of key spreadsheets that they provide to us, so that when we put in our plan, all of the kind of capacity requirements for resource adequacy, all of the emissions requirements are met according to their methodology. So that those 2 documents I just described are the resource data template. That's where we put in, here's what we're planning to build, and the clean system power calculator, which tells us, given what we're planning to build, how will we be interacting with the market, and how does that affect kind of the state's view of what our emissions will be. And then all of this is summarized in a narrative document that provides the results, talks about how EBCE will use them, and how we are continuing to participate in this public process. That's a little distinct from the deliverables that we provide to the EBCE board. We will provide everything that we are filing with the CPUC, but I think we are interested in making sure that the analysis doesn't just stop once we've submitted those documents. We want to use this as kind of a jumping off point to make sure that we understand more about what is driving our portfolio costs, understand more about what resources are available to us and what resources will work the best for our customers in both themselves and especially in concert as part of a broader portfolio. And mostly we want to identify what potential threats might arise related to achieving our emissions-free portfolio by 2030, and how do we make sure that over the next number of years we are on the right pathway and trajectory to achieving that goal. Next slide, please. So I'll skip over this slide pretty quickly. Basically, this just says we started this IRP cycle in February. There's been a variety of kind of updates, and we are planning to file it on November 1st, according to the due date with the CPUC, which means we will be presenting the results of the study to the board in October. Next slide, please. So what do we get out of doing the IRP? First, it shows that we are trying our very hardest to be responsible members of the California grid. We want to plan so that our customers have enough power, but because of the interconnectedness of the system, we need to make sure that we are doing that in concert with the rest of the states, because outages in one place or failure to serve load in one place can really affect the ability to serve it elsewhere. This also allows us the chance to align with the CPUC view of the state energy environment going forward. And on top of that, allows us to say, the CPUC has indicated to us that they believe this is the future we are headed towards, and we might differ specifically in terms of things like resource cost and availability, and things like that. And so we both get to see, here's what the state and the public process thinks the next 10 years looks like, and how might we plan for a different view that we have. It allows us to look at a variety of policy futures and say, under these different policy futures, what are the optimal choices that we can make now and in future years to ensure that we're able to meet our goals as well as remaining in compliance with the state. It allows us to figure out what might be the challenges that we see related to achieving our emissions goals. And then finally, one of the analytical benefits specifically of this round of the IRP, we are using for the first time an open source software, and really kind of hoping that one of the results of this process will be that we're able to bring some of these modeling capabilities in-house, so that instead of having kind of a once every 2 year IRP update, we'd really like to start thinking about trying to keep that IRP more as a living document, so that we file our best view of things right now, but then 6 months from now, we are able to assess what has changed, and what else might we need to take into account as we're planning over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. So our analytical approach really consists of three steps. The first step is, what is the power system in the state going to look like in 10 years? And this, EBCE has some role in this, but a lot of these decisions are based on CPUC guidance and the decisions made by other load serving entities. So the first analysis that we do is, given California's goals over the next 10 years, what general power plants, how much solar, how much wind, how much storage will the state need to build to make sure that the lights are kept on and they're meeting their emissions goals and requirements? That feeds into the next step, which is what is the price environment that that build puts us in? You know, depending on what resources are deployed and the way that the market kind of interacts with each other, if there's a lot of solar, that's going to be a much different pricing environment that our resources will interact with relative to a situation where there is a lot more wind. And so we take that state level build and then we say, okay, what are the prices that our resources are going to be either competing against or able to take advantage of? And then finally, given that statewide context, we bring it down to our individual planning level and say, given the goals set forth by the board, given our belief about prices, what is the mix of resources that we want to get? How much wind, how much solar, how much storage do we need to make sure that we are keeping the lights on, achieving our goals, and keeping costs under control as much as possible for our customers? Next slide, please, Adrian. So the way that we kind of implement those, we have some sensitivities at each level of that analysis. The first sensitivity is mostly determined by the state. We are required to file plans that are consistent with 25 and 30 MMT statewide targets by 2035. So those are required. We have to run those cases. We have been considering the 25 MMT case statewide to be our base case. That's what we think is going to be the world we think is kind of what to expect over the next 10 years. On top of that, we have also developed a case in which the capacity concerns, some of those that we saw recently with the heat wave, keep Diablo online, and we saw some legislation related to that recently, or keep some of the once through cooling plants online that are scheduled to retire. And we wanted to make sure we understand if that is the future that California has in store for it, what does that do to the rest of the resources on the system? From there, when we look at our price scenarios, we really focus on, there's the base case, which is business as usual, but then we did a stress case as well to say, what happens if we're in a really low hydro year and maybe a really low hydro year with very high natural gas prices? We want to make sure that the portfolio that we're designing is consistent with great performance in the base case, but also is consistent with protecting our customers in a situation where gas prices drive market power prices higher in the state of California and hydro is not as available. And those two things can really affect prices. And then finally, we do in our own portfolio expansion modeling, what resources will EBCE buy? The base case assumes no expansion of the EBCE territory, and that arises from the requirement that we follow the load forecast set out by the CEC in the Integrated Energy Policy Report, or IPER. That is a requirement of the IRP process, and that was done before Stockton voted to join, and our board voted to include Stockton. So in our base case, we do not include Stockton, but then we want to run a sensitivity where we say, let's make sure we're making the right decisions now so that when Stockton joins, we are able to serve them without, again, raising costs for any of our existing customers, keeping costs low for Stockton customers, and achieving our emissions goals. And then we are also looking at a case where the supply, we've seen issues with supply chain disruptions over the last number of years. We want to make sure that our portfolio is protected against situations where we think the power plants that we're investing in are going to be ready and available earlier than they actually end up being. And how do we protect ourselves and make sure, again, that threats to the supply chain do not threaten our ability to achieve our goals? Next slide, please, Adrian. So Marie, who was sadly not able to be with us today, she likes to compare an IRP to really going shopping, and you're going down a variety of aisles and you have your shopping cart with you. And in aisle one, you have that kind of statewide view. What does the state look like? What do we want to put in our cart to analyze on that state perspective? Now we go to the next aisle and we say, okay, aisle two has these price scenarios, and we want to grab everything we can from aisle two. And IL3 says, all right, we're down to the, the really specific, the things we're going to need for, for this example, maybe dinner this week. And we want to make sure that all the decisions that we're making are consistent with the goals of EBCE. Unfortunately, the shopping cart is a little too small. Adrian, next slide, please. So that forces us to combine some of these questions. So instead of being able to look at, really specifically at Diablo retirement and once through cooling is delayed and maybe global supply chain shortages cause a change in the statewide California build, we've kind of narrowed that down for the moment to a 30 MMT scenario, 25 MMT scenario. Again, both of those are required by the CPUC. And then another scenario that looks at what happens if the capacity concerns that we've seen keep Diablo online for a long time, keep the once through cooling plants around that are scheduled to shut down. Then in IL2, we'd love to look at every single combination of price scenarios, but we're starting with the CPUC price assumptions. And then we want to plan for what happens if things are not good. If gas prices are high and that drives the market price of power in California higher, and if a really bad drought year can also have those effects. And then finally, we have our base portfolio for our local planning. We look at our extreme delays, and then we have a load growth case that looks both at what happens when Stockton comes on and maybe San Joaquin County if they join as well, or what happens if we're really, really successful in some of these electrification projects? What happens if our load grows because we are out there hooking up electric vehicles and deploying more electrification in houses? We want to be sure that we're prepared for all of those futures. Next slide, please, Adrian. So there are two major impacts of the IRP for our kind of month-to-month and year-to-year planning. The first, we are in the third cycle of this specific brand of planning in the state, the Integrated Resource Plan. In the past two cycles, the CPUC has ordered load serving entities to sign new contracts for certain resource types. So we are anticipating that will happen after this filing as well. So we want to be prepared for a situation where a CPUC comes back and tells us whatever portfolio you have, it must include the following things over the next 10 years. And this kind of it leads us to the next impact of the IRP, and that's the risk that these procurement mandates may start to kind of hamper our ability to fully design our own portfolio. So if IRP-driven procurement says we have to go out and get certain technology types, we then have to come back and look carefully at our internal IRP and the internal work that we've done to make sure that the plan is still consistent, again, with low cost for our customers and achieving all of our emission goals. So those are really the impacts of the IRP and the things that we should prepare for coming out of it. And what we'll see in the meeting next month is starting this discussion of here's what the next 10 years look like under our current guidance and a little bit the interpretation of that guidance. And then we can start a discussion about what are our short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans for making sure that we can meet our load for our customers going forward. I believe that's the last slide. And then any questions that you have? Although, again, on the specifics of the IRP, I would say we will go into that a lot more next month. So the results are maybe not something that we should spend a lot of time on.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and take some clarifying questions. Go ahead, Member Martinez.
Thank you for the great presentation, Doug. I was just wondering if that passage of Senate Bill 846 threw a wrench into your planning as it extended that retirement of Diablo Canyon.
I mean, it certainly does, because our base case and the kind of CPUC directed case that we're seeing is no longer kind of consistent with what we were thinking what they were thinking when they set that up. But that was one of our sensitivities before it was actually passed, because that is something that is, it's one of the biggest question facing the kind of California energy market right now is, will Diablo stay on? And, how will that affect, one simple way, well, not necessarily simple, but one way it could affect our resource portfolio is, nuclear is running pretty flat out all the time. It's really hard to turn down. So it becomes a little harder when nuclear is on the system to accommodate as much solar as we might. So that's why we really wanted to make sure that we put together plans that at least look at that, to ensure that we're not going out and, investing in something that if Diablo stays around would really be a much different value proposition for us.
Okay, are there any other further clarifying questions before we moved on to comment and then discussion? I see no hands raised, so we'll go ahead and go to public comment. Adrian, we're going to do 1 minute.
Great. There is no one signed up for public comment at this time.
Okay. I'll give it a couple of seconds. I see no hands raised either, so we'll go ahead and move back to the members. Is there any discussion by the members? I see no hands raised. The only thing I would say, Doug, and thank you very much for this technical presentation, is just if in our regular board meeting, because we don't have necessarily the time to go through it, and I do have some questions, and perhaps I can do that offline, and then you can be ready. But and that would just be really on the last bullet point on sort of risks and risk management. I think, that you did describe certain scenarios in the presentation where you could have a confluence of issues all at once. Those are very real. Those are actually very real risks, right? And so, understanding those risks and then, how we would respond to them. It would probably be out of the scope to go into too much detail because this is really a reporting mechanism. But I think it does spark the question of, well, what if, and so forth. The other thing too, I would be interested in our general board meeting is to discuss how much impact EBCE can have on those discussions overall in terms of CPUC's, requirements and that making sure that we protect our interests, because I'm not convinced yet that the CPUC has really caught that their box is not really sort of the same shape as our circle, and so I want to be sure that they're being informed by one of the more influential and biggest CCAs in the state that this is really how it should look, and to talk a little bit about how we may be lobbying them to help them understand what this scenario is by subject matter experts like yourself. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. Thank you very much. And that will be item, let's see, we're at item 5.
Yep.
And that's the update to the net energy metering policy. And this is also an informational item.
Great. Thank you, Director Lopez. Good afternoon, board committee, staff, and members of the public. I'm Kelly Brezovic, Director of Account Services. I'm here with my teammate, Gabrielle Ruxin, who's our customer care analyst. We'll be discussing a recommendation to update our net energy metering or NEM policy starting next April. I'll try and go pretty quickly so that we do have time for questions. Feel free to pause if needed. Adrian, can you go to the next slide? Thanks. So for a reminder, so NEM is how we compensate our customers that have their own on-site generation. Typically, we think of that as rooftop solar. PG&E's default NEM policy and our standard NEM policy are pretty much the same, with credits and cash outs paid at the same levels. However, our default policy today is a monthly true-up, meaning that customers generate credits but they do receive a bill if they don't have enough credits or generation to cover their use. And then we do a cash out annually. PG&E's default NEM offering is an annual true-up, so customers will accrue credits and debits over the course of a full 12-month period with a full true-up at the end of the year. PG&E does also offer a monthly option as well. Adrienne, next slide, and you can click that twice just so we can have all this slide up. There we go, thanks. So earlier, a couple of years ago, we had identified that some customers on this monthly version of NEM might have actually done better financially with an annual true-up. This is a timing issue of when credits and debits are generated. So we added an additional step in 2019 that we're calling the Nem Sweep that accounts for this difference. It's a series of calculations that makes our monthly true-up look financially like an annual NEM true-up come April. It's a really time and labor intensive calculation that does delay our cash out process. Also, when we surveyed about 500 NEM customers in 2020, roughly half of those customers did say that they would prefer an annual true-up. So going on to the next slide. So with those things in mind, we are proposing to offer our customers a choice of either a monthly true-up or an annual true-up that would be held in April. With this, then that monthly true-up, we would remove the NEM Sweep calculation. This is also what PG&E does for their monthly NEM customers as well. We can go to the next slide. So quick review, we do have 3 different NEM customer types, although I will say this does affect the vast majority of our NEM customers that are being paid out or cashed out rather at that net surplus compensation value, again, mirroring what PG&E does. This does not affect our legacy municipal or our Fair NEM customers that are credited or paid out at retail plus a penny. So we can go on to the next slide. Which is a bit of an eye chart with some numbers. I'll just highlight a couple of numbers here. We're talking about this affecting 45,000 standard EBC NEM customers. Roughly a third of those are net generators, meaning that they actually, over the course of a 12-month period, generate more energy than they consume. However, due to some of those timing issues, almost half of the customers receive some money due to this NEM Sweep, where we're compensating them to make it look like it's an annual NEM true-up. It's not always a lot of money. The average NEM Sweep is only about $20. So for some customers, having a monthly cash out, monthly true-up might be beneficial. They may prefer that to receiving an extra payout of $5 at the end of the year. So the choice is really in the customer's hands. And let's go to the next slide here. We can look at some of those key differences and then talk about how customers can make this choice. So today, our customers are paid out at our monthly credits are at the retail rate. That stays the same. The cash out in April is at net surplus compensation. That stays the same. However, the next 3 items here will be different depending on if the customer chooses monthly or annual. With the monthly true-up, the customer would pay for those debits when they're due. An annual customer would accrue that debt over time. The annual true-up option, then that's part of the annual choice. A customer might then have a large payment to make to EBCE, or they receive a credit or a check due to overgeneration. And then the annual NEM Sweep calculation that I touched on earlier, we would be removing that option because customers can now choose if they want monthly or annual. So going on to the next slide. So here's the part that, because this is it's a 12-month cycle, so customers really can make this choice annually. We're looking to have customers make that choice by March 1. And then if they don't make a choice, it would be defaulted to that monthly true-up. Customer communications for this obviously are really important. We want to make sure that everyone knows about their choices. So starting in December, pending board approval, EBCE would send a letter and an email to all those affected customers. They would have roughly 3 months to make that choice. And then we're looking at opportunities to have more communications with our ongoing NEM enrollments, customers that interconnect during the year or customers that move into an existing building that has NEM. So some sort of a NEM welcome kit, in addition to the regular mailings that they receive from EBCE upon enrollment. And then the next slide. Just a quick touch on financial implications. So really the ongoing financial implications of this option depend on how many customers choose the annual option versus monthly. Most customers would see that they owe EBCE the most in December, and then the amount of money that they owe us would decrease a little bit in January and February. And then if every single customer on standard NEM chooses this policy, we could see the annual policy, we could see having, sending out $2 million in bills to these customers. It's not likely that all of those customers will select the annual policy. So I think that we were more likely to see something like 1/2 to 3/4 of Nem Sweep recipients choosing the annual method, which just basically means that we will have some outstanding debits, but then we'll just receive those payments in April and May when customers pay that true up bill. This is then the cycle just starts again the following year. There may be also a fee to implement from SMUD. And based on feedback received today, I'll ask SMUD for an estimated level of effort or a cost to build and have that on hand for the next board meeting. So just looking at the next slide, Adrienne. So my proposal today is that I bring some version of this based on your feedback to the board of directors in October for discussion and vote. That would then allow our team to provide adequate notice to our customers so that they're able to choose their NEM option, and we're able to build out this service for a start in April 2023. So just a reminder that April 2023 true-up would follow today's policy, and then this new policy would start then after the next true-up. So we're not changing anything for the customers and what they're expecting right now. And that is it. We're ready for questions. Thanks.
Clarifying questions at this point. Thank you, Member Kalb. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to go, unfortunately, but the one question is, as we all know, the PUC is considering some changes to NEM 3 going forward.
Yes.
We don't yet know what those are going to be. They haven't released a new PD yet. So to what extent will whatever they end up doing, we don't really know what they're going to do, impact our decision as to how we design our policy, if that much at all? Just want to get it clear.
Yeah, that's a great question, Director Kalb. So I do think that we could see the new NEM policy from the CPUC would likely have sort of a legacy time period when the existing NEM customers receive their current treatment under whatever load serving entity they have today. And then new NEM customers would receive a new treatment. The previous iteration of NEM 3.0 actually started, I believe it was residential customers all on a monthly true-up plan. So that would be actually in line with our existing policy. And then I think there was a provision to allow customers to make a choice. So we're kind of aligned with at least the previous version of this, with allowing customers to make that decision for themselves. Other provisions, though, as far as like cash out values, we would have to update our system and our policy based on what's coming out of the CPUC and what we vote on as what you vote on as the board.
Any other further clarifying questions? I have a question. So I see, I think what I'm seeing here is that the customers will have a choice. And let's say they change their mind somewhere in mid-cycle, then what?
Yeah, so because this is an annual, it is an annual process. So it would be a choice that you're able to make annually. So if you made a choice sometime in October that you wanted to go back to monthly, you would have to wait until the following year to make that choice, because NEM itself is cyclical on an annual basis based on when there's more generation in the summer, less generation in the winter time.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any further clarifying questions? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to public comment. Adrian, 1 minute, please.
Okay, thank you. There are no speakers currently signed up for public comment for this item.
Okay, I'll give it a couple of seconds. All right, I see no raised hands either. So we're going to go ahead and go to discussion by the members. Again, this is an informational item, but we could give, our feedback for direction. Would anybody like to help provide direction? Please raise your hand. Go ahead, Member Cal.
I just, when we do see when there is some resolution at the PUC, and I'm worried as to what it might be, but nevertheless, I would just ask that we have a revisit this discussion here at the executive committee or wherever to just get more updated. And to the extent that it might change how we put our policy of implementing this, maybe not right away, but a year or two later or whatnot. I just want to make sure we discuss the implications. Yeah, it's a little worrisome. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Nope. Okay, I will just say that I thank you very much for your presentation. I support the proposals you have here. I think choice is good. And I think that this is something that I think that is another value add that we will bring to people in the service territory. So thank you very much for that and for your patience too in the last board meeting and sitting through that and then not being able to follow through with that. I apologize. These things do happen in the agendas, Kelly. So we'll go ahead and bring that to the board, I think, in the next meeting. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next agenda item. And that is any comments or requests to place items on future board agendas. Any members? Okay. Well, I thank everybody for participating today, and this concludes our meeting. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
care.
you.